gingerbread or anything like that from my mom when I went over to Christmas.
I'm kind of lucky that I don't like gingerbread, so Christmas is not a big temptation for me. So I don't have that many things that make me go crazy. Yeah, gingerbread. My daughter in school, they have every month they have a theme of study. And December was gingerbread. Can you talk about gingerbread? I mean, they're in kindergarten, so. Exactly.
This is
That was just very, it's an experience, and it wasn't bad.
no, it isn't. Actually, it's how are you? Well, why did you change?
So did you change the beginning stuff?
Got out of business.
Different also, different system.
Remember, he was doing a test of something.
This is about describing, yeah, let's just.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, exactly. It's good. I never noticed that. Just it's in there, yeah. I think it's in the book. I like it. Yeah. You see?
Yeah. And there will be there's a
Well, that's where I Richard.
and Steve as a graduate student.
No, it's from her.
Oh, Christina.
Sorry.
What did I do?
She's very good student. No, sorry.
Haters. And I
Oh,
Oh, so she was playing the role.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to our special seminar. We're very lucky today to have Brent Sauder. Brent is the Director of Strategic Partnerships.
Changes
So it's
daily.
research and partnerships today.
It changes daily.
Every day.
Every day.
But he's what I call a matchmaker and a rainmaker. He puts people together and then he finds ways of funding them and so on. So he's a good guy to know. And I've known him a long time. In fact, we were just chatting about the old days of Macmillan Bloedel, which is part of BC's history. If you've been around that long, we used to have forest companies that were owned in British Columbia. Macmillan Bloedel Research was actually doing research in forest equipment. He was working strongly with Peter Lawrence and other people. But after he did a master's degree in forestry, and that's where he went to MBA. But after that, he was a major player in getting high-tech rolling in British Columbia. He was the executive director of the BC Advanced Systems Institute, which was a really interesting, innovative attempt started by Pat McGeer to get high-tech rolling, because the universities weren't doing much. This was a way of challenging the universities to get going, and it really did. And Brent made it happen. Unfortunately, the next government decided that wasn't a good idea, and they terminated the whole project, which was another serious mistake. But then Brent came back to UBC as the director of the Office of Research Services. Then he took on the challenge of going to Victoria and being the assistant deputy minister in charge of implementing technology innovation strategy within the province. And that was a challenge.
It didn't happen either.
No, it took him 2 years to figure out that wasn't happening. And then he came back, and now, as I say, he's director of strategic partnerships. So we're very lucky to have Brent. He's going to tell us about what UBC is a living lab.
Thanks, Alan. Good afternoon. Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about Living Lab. It's going to be a mixture. The presentation is a mixture of kind of a marketing document and sort of high-level words that we use, and also some descriptions of what we're actually doing. Because as you know, marketing and sales has nothing to do with actually what you deliver. So that's we want to sort of cross that chasm. When I went to the government, I quickly learned that the opportunity to actually make something happen is really, really closely aligned with the resources that you have to make it happen. And that means money in most cases. And I talked quite a bit within government about using the procurement model or the procurement ability of government to actually drive innovation. And some people got it and some people didn't. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that approach is impeded by purchasing rules and regulations that you have to be fair and equitable. Other countries seem to have figured out how to do it without being fair and still being, fair and equitable. So I'm still hopeful that someday we will see this actually come to pass. When I came back to UBC, there was a terrific opportunity. I guess there was one negative opportunity, was the fact that my old job at ORS had been filled by somebody else who does an excellent job, and so I was looking for a new thing to do. And so this whole idea of strategic partnerships, and we became very clear that we didn't want, I call this the Coke deal, we didn't want to do another Coke deal, which was the infamous thing we did with Coca-Cola where we signed them up. They got exclusive domain to UBC, and everybody had to drink Coke product, and if Pepsi came on the scene, boy, we were in big trouble and all that good stuff.
But we did have an exclusive with Canadian Airlines.
Yes.
And their drink was Pepsi. And I wanted to know, were you allowed to drink it if you paid your ticket through?
And we've tried other ones with TELUS and a few others, and it usually gets us into more trouble. And a lot of that really, the benefits of that really don't, in a lot of ways, trickle down to the researchers and the students. So we wanted to see if there was an opportunity to do something different. And at the same time, UBC obviously was becoming known as a sustainability leader. with the work that John Robinson had been doing around the SEARS project and some of the other activities, UBC was getting a real name for itself. We reached our Kyoto targets earlier than anybody else did. We have been basically setting the goal and setting the vision for a lot of activities for almost a decade now, or maybe over a decade now, on that whole area. So it made it easier for me when I came back to say, okay, we've got these sustainability goals, we want to get there as a university. Can we use what we're spending to run this university to actually get us there? And also, can we also integrate that with our students and our researchers at the same time? And that's where the Living Lab thing came out. I did not dream up the Living Lab. I don't want to take credit for it. It was here long before. What I'm basically doing is trying to give it some legs. So when they've been asked many times to put together a marketing document for what are we doing around sustainability and how does this interact, we come back to these 4 words. Basically, there's a commitment, which is a key thing because, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's a commitment by the university that they are actually going to achieve either these goals or these mandates. And that's important because that usually means that there's dedicated funding. And I'm sorry, I do have to be crass, I always come back to money because that really is a key driver. There's a desire to integrate, which means that the university is putting some effort into pulling the various factors together and bringing together groups that have not in the past actually talked to each other. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then the other big thing was the demonstration. The ability to actually use this facility, this campus that we have here, to actually demonstrate at scale, and this was a comment we were talking about just before my talk here, is it's very hard to find a place at scale, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then through this whole thing, of course, the whole thing is supposed to be some sort of inspirational epiphany and all that good stuff. So. But it's a great branding thing, and we'll talk a little about that. So on the commitment side, it's fairly easy to see, and you should all know these. I mean, these are sort of the mantra. The targets that we have on the GHG targets are quite impressive, and they are based on, I think it's 2007 is the baseline. And the understanding is that, or the realization you have to have, is that by 2007, UBC was actually well on its way to reducing its GHG footprint. So it's going to be tough. So you see by 2027, we reached the Kyoto targets. That's earlier than everybody else was supposed to be there. So we've got set a goal, and this has been signed up to by Professor Tu and our Board of Governors. 33% reduction by 2015, which is tomorrow as far as most people are concerned. A 67% reduction by 2020 and 100% reduction by 2050. I will not be here in 2050, so good luck.
So that means that we're actively consuming greenhouse gas, I assume?
No, we're generating. This is generation of greenhouse gas. So
No, I'm sorry, but in order to have a 100% reduction, we must be generating sometimes, so we have to be absorbing something?
Yeah, we have to be either absorbing some, or we can make do with what we did in 2007. Got that, Kelly?
Oh, the reduction is over 2007.
Yes, it's 2007 is the baseline.
Okay.
But what you got to understand that the next 20 years is going to see something like 3 million square feet added to UBC. So how are we going to do that when we're still growing? It's going to be a challenge. Now we have figured out how we're going to do the 2015. We have a roadmap for that. We have somewhat of an idea for 2020, but it's up to the smartness of the researchers in this audience to get us to the 100%. Well, actually, it's up to all of you for even all of them. So, but that's out there, and when you see that, that equates to the fact that when we spend money, this becomes part of the equation and part of the decision making. So, for example, we might spend the money on a natural gas-fired thermal heating system, right? But that will produce GHGs. So if we took that money and did something different with it, is there something that we could do that would help us move towards these targets? Okay. So that's this whole idea of pushing the envelope by not accepting things as they are, as the status quo. So how do we actually do that? And this is a new thing, is this integration of all the parts that we have in the university. And I might as well, I'll talk about it now. I may actually have, may repeat it in another slide, but I don't think so. So what we've done differently is we've realized that UBC is in a very unique opportunity. We've got about 1,000 acres here, where I think I mean, I've said this enough, and if you say things enough many times, people believe it, so let's believe this. We are the second largest land-granted university in North America. It's big. We're going to have a university town just south of us. The neat thing about that is we don't sell the land. We actually get all the land back in 99 years. It's amazing. People are spending $1 million on their houses, but they're actually going to give it back to UBC 100 years from now. Anyway, that's their business. So the idea is that here's an opportunity for someone to work with us who wants to develop solutions for the future at a huge scale, at a scale of a city. And that's not very common, especially around university campuses. The other thing that makes UBC unique is the fact of control. We actually control our own power grid system. So BC Hydro delivers the grid power to our substations, but after that, it becomes UBC's. We own it. We own the distribution of the heat network. We own the telephone system. We own all those little things that in a municipality would be owned by a bunch of people. So we can in fact do things, believe it or not, a lot faster than you can in other jurisdictions. And you have a lot more control, because not only are we on the generating side, if we're talking about power, but we're also on the consumption side. There's another slight little benefit, is the fact that we give ourselves our own development permits. Think about that one. So this whole idea of the living laboratory is, let's bring all these groups together. We've got the researchers, we've got the students. That was kind of a common thing. I mean, if you go back 5-10 years, that was always the thing. And then industry partners. We had the UILO type system where you had industry collaborations and everything else. But when I was here before, I mean, there was always this joke that you would never get anybody in the Faculty of Law to actually write a contract that the university would sign. I mean, you would never get a researcher to actually do something that you're going to depend upon. Right? That's totally changed. And it's totally changed by the fact that we want to be in a leadership position. And you can only be in a leadership position if you're trying stuff that nobody else has tried. And guess what? That's what you folks do. Right? So the idea is to bring the operations, and we spend, I think UBC is something around $1 billion or operation every year. I mean, it's got a huge budget just to keep the lights on, the roads cleared, all that kind of stuff. It's huge. So there's operators, the researchers, the students, the residents now, because we now have a town to our south, and then our industry partners. And we bring that together with these facilities that we've already invested in, which are our academic campus and the university town. It's a very, very cool mix that I don't think anybody else has. And that's part of when I go around talking to companies, why they want to get involved. That's one of the key things. Because right now, time to market is key with companies. They want to get a product out there. They want to own the domain. And also, this gives them an opportunity to demonstrate. There's not many places in the world where you can actually demonstrate new technology. Most organizations, they in fact want to be a close third or fourth or fifth. Once a technology is proven, they'll look at it. BC Hydro is a great example. BC Hydro will not put anything on their grid that has not been demonstrated somewhere in the world for 3 years. Okay? So we have a company, Sanyo Panasonic, wants to show something. Well, BC Hydro won't let them plug it in. But come and see us after you've had 3 years of demonstration. Well, where can we demonstrate it? Can we demonstrate it on the hydro network? No, because you haven't had 3 years of whatever. So this is a great role for UBC to be, so we can actually be the testing place for these things. And as long as they meet something that we actually need as an operational need, and that's what we'll talk about. So this demonstration is a huge opportunity. So right now we have some what we call signature projects, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. We're doing this thing called continuous optimization. That's basically continually watching the buildings to see how do they behave on an energy scale. We're partnering with companies like Pulse and some of the other companies to actually continually watch our buildings to see if they're behaving abnormally. CIRS building, that's the Center for Integrated Research on Sustainability. That's that new building that's just been put up on West Mall. It's been a huge undertaking, and now is just a point at the point of where that's actually the research is happening. It's where my office is. And the interesting thing there is, as you're all aware, I think the building is in fact the research project. And so any of us who have an office in there, we've actually had to sign a charter saying things like we won't have baseboard heaters and we won't plug in things. I keep threatening that I'm going to get myself a printer, and I keep getting yelled at, so I can't do that. Hot water conversion, you've seen some of the streets have been dug up around campus. We have a steam system currently on campus. That's being changed over time to a hot water system, much more efficient, much more effective. Unfortunately, as far as we can see, this hot water conversion, there really isn't an awful lot of space there for researchers, pretty mature technology. So we see that as mainly just an operations play. Yes, Kelly?
Could you just briefly explain for those of us who aren't into it, why hot water is so much better than steam? Because they had steam for over 100 years.
Something weird, I'm not the expert on this, Kelly, but there was something like, and these numbers are wrong, but the temperature of the steam left the steam plant at, 200 degrees. The return temperature was about 180 degrees. So somewhere there wasn't enough energy being taken out of the system. And so what you do, and what's happening in Europe is it takes longer for the buildings to heat up, obviously, because you don't have as much energy per unit of volume or whatever you're pushing through the pipe, but it is tremendously more efficient than, and actually most of your conditions here, when you actually get into a building, you have a conversion from steam to hot water. I think most of the things inside these buildings are actually hot water, so anyway, it's the right thing to do. And the Bioenergy Center, which is the one that I've been involved in for the last 2 years since I came back. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So the whole idea is to inspire, to get researchers involved, for students to see that this is a place where things are happening, and also to drive innovation and change. So that's the whole goal. That was sort of the preamble. So a living lab project, I mean, as I said, you all know what industry collaboration projects are all about. You find an industrial partner, they help work with you, they define a problem, you work with them in collaboration, and you come up with a solution. And that's been a model that's been really pushed hard by the Canadian government and the granting authorities and whatever, and it's been very, very successful. We're adding something else to this. What we're adding is we're adding the UBC Operations. So UBC Operations means that we're building this 3 million square feet, we're running this campus. What are the problems a small city has? And how can we rectify those problems? Whether they be meeting our GHG goals, reducing our costs of operation, or increasing the efficiency of our operations, those kinds of things. And there always has to be a third party. And the third party can be usually for me it's an industry partner, but it could be a regulatory body, it could be an NGO, or it could be a municipality. And we're talking to the City of Vancouver, for example, looking at some of their problems to see if there's an opportunity to do this kind of thing with them as well. So what makes a good project? And let me tell you this, that my biggest concern about these projects right now is that they have been driven mainly by the operations folk. The operations folk obviously have the mandate to meet those GHG targets. And so they are hunting very hard, making sure that they can actually achieve and realize those goals. My worry is that we would actually build these things and we present, I hope, the opportunity to the researchers, and they will just say, well, that's interesting, but that's not what I do. And so what we have to do is work a lot harder on events like today and to work with you folk to make sure that you understand what we're trying to do. I get more involved in finding out the things you do and see how we can customize and bring things together. The rest of my talk is more converged towards coming from your side. But as I said, right now, the bioenergy project, the smart grid project, and the optimization project are actually being driven by operations. Operations saying, we need this. And if we are lucky, we see opportunities for engaging faculty. Okay? So I think we've got to tune that a little bit more. And what I've said is the easiest way, of course, to get faculty involved is to provide a little bit of money. And that seems to work quite well. So in some ways, yeah. Well, I can bring the money by saying we already bring usually an industrial partner with us who will sort those things out. So a research interest, it has to have research interest. If it's not, it's just a straight procurement deal between operations and the company. It has an operational need. It has strategic product service development. So a company sees value that this is something that is not in their catalog today. If operations can go out and simply buy this from their catalog, it is not a living lab product. What they want to do is they want to buy they want to develop, co-develop with the company the solutions that the company would like to see in their catalog 5 years from now. And that's why when we originally started putting this together, I said that faculty will not be interested in the technology that's in the catalog today, unless they want to do some tinkering around. But that's really not the kind of stuff that you want to do. You want to do the disruptive technology. You want to be in the change business. And that's why we want to get into those things where we're not accepting the technologies of today, we're building the technologies of tomorrow. And then there's championing coordination. We need to have champions, both on the research side and the operations side, and that's what we tend to do within a project. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we've done that in one of our projects. I think this is one of your guys. What's in it for the researchers? Well, a big thing, and I know from the computer science guys when I'm talking, is access to data. It's amazing. There are huge amounts of data being produced. The CERS building, for example, has 1,200 sensors in that building, all generating data. I don't think they have a clue what they're going to do with that data. They may have some idea, but they may not have a very good idea. Another example is there's sort of a holy grail going on with building systems. And people say, the signature, the energy signature that comes out of a building is kept. It's metered in most cases, and it's actually, the data is stored. The question is, at what frequency should you take that data, and how deep can you actually dig into that data? What would really be helpful is if you, by looking at that data, could say, you know what, that's the HVAC system that's causing that problem, or it's the chiller, or it's the fan. And actually, BC Hydro is very, very interested in actually seeing how they could actually achieve that. So being able to do the signature analysis work on those kinds of things is a really, really hard problem. Yes, Kelly?
This is kind of half a comment, half a question. So all the bullets there are good. There's one that's missing.
Yes.
And the one that's missing is that most research, I think in this department at least, there's a large component of it where we're working with people at other universities.
Yep.
So there's a research community out there.
Yep.
And what seems to be characteristic of almost everything that UBC, the university, does is that it's all done here. And so where's the collaboration with other universities?
If we need to have, if we want, well, okay, so here's an example. Right now we're trying to build a relationship. I'm building a relationship with Fraunhofer in Germany, but it is around a living lab project. So yes, we're quite willing to support that. If we need to go outside of the bounds of UBC to get the expertise or to design something around the project, we're quite happy to do that.
I guess my comment would be it's not if, it's when, because there's no other area of research where we're self-sustained.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, that's a good point. But the interesting thing about this is it gives you the opportunity to have real-world problems to solve. It also frees the researcher up from the operational problems. The operations group will actually run the show. You don't have to supply that. Basically, what they're going to run this as a part of their day-to-day operation. What you need to do is just tap into it. The other impact is if you're actually looking for what impact your research does, this actually has a way of accelerating it because usually the partner in the project wants to take the solution and proliferate it all over the place globally, for example. What's in it for industry? We're finding that more and more it's about product development. They're seeing that, you know, here's market pull. Here's a city or a community that's identified a gap in the technology. If they come up with a solution, here's something that we will be able to market around the world. It's a benefit and a bit of a problem, because one of the things we're running into is the fact that most of the large global companies don't have their product development groups in Canada. So we end up having to talk to Minneapolis, Silicon Valley, those kinds of places. Those are the people that actually have the dollars to do the product development, because that's where we need the money from. We need the money from the product development people, not from the sales and marketing group. And so in some ways we've actually found that dealing with the local group is a deterrent to actually getting through to those people. But certainly with people like Cisco, although we still have to go through Toronto, we're having a very good relationship. In fact, you folks supposedly have better relationships with some of your researchers in these companies than we actually do. Because historically, we've always dealt with operations, has always dealt with the sales and marketing folks. So that's something else that you can help bring to the table. They're very interested, obviously, in the fully leveraging of that's available for research in Canada. Again, we run into these silly NSERC rules that say things have to be developed and maintained and whatever in Canada to get the matching fund, but some organizations it's hard to do, others are easier. They're very, very interested in that. And the exposure is a big thing. They like to be obviously involved in these kinds of things, but the demonstration is also a big thing. There are very few jurisdictions that will accept the demonstration of a product that they're not sure will actually work. I mean, most people want to have something fully baked before they actually roll it out, whereas we are a little more accepted to taking the risk because we feel we can mitigate that risk with our researchers. And that's basically what we're doing with the Bioenergy plan. For UBC, what do we get out of it? We get an operational solution. We also get leverage funding. So a good example is the Bioenergy Center. We were going to spend about $8 million refurbishing our powerhouse. So when I came back, we said, let's try and do it a different way. And so that bioenergy plant, the one at Agronomy Road and Lower Mall, is about a $30 million complex, and it cost us $8 million. The rest came from grant funding. And interesting, because it's an industrial facility, we got funding from organizations that don't normally support universities. So we got it was a very, very interesting. We have about 5 funding partners on that project, and that's the big one. That's the one I fell into after I came back from government. But you know, as Pierre will say, it's even if everything fails, we have a building that's worth more than $8 million. It's not going to fail. I don't want to plant that seed. And then the whole thing about continuous innovation community. I mean, let's face it, if we are going to be leaders in this area, we have to know how we're going to bring innovation into our operations. How it's a people thing, it's a technology thing, it's everything. How do you actually, what's the human factors side of actually getting innovation and continually rolling out new things? I mean, we get a lot of pushback. Oh, especially when they see me, they say, you know, here's more work, because it is easier just to implement the same old thing over and over again. But that's not going to make you a leader. It's going to make you a follower, or at least as good as everybody else. And that's one of the comments I have in the City of Vancouver. The City of Vancouver doesn't want to take any risks at all, and they're saying, well, all we should do is like change the light bulbs and go for recycled paper, and we will be the best. You'll be one of the best, but you won't be the best. And so that's where the leadership role comes in, and we hope that this helps as one of the things that will draw researchers to come to UBC. It certainly has already had an impact on students. The students see this as one of the reasons why they choose to come to UBC, also because of the quality of the researchers, obviously. And then we want to see this as the choice for industry collaboration. And I have basically a 5 or 6 company hit list that I'd like to see. We've already got Honeywell here. We're going to have Cisco here in not too far from now. I would hope in the first quarter of this year. We're dealing with Sanyo Panasonic on the battery side, Alpha Technologies, a higher profile with them. We already have BC Hydro coming on board. I'd like to see add groups like IBM and maybe Google and a few others. But again, we have to see where they fit into our operational fabric. So the process, I just quickly wanted to go, this is from your point of view, this is how these things are generally driven. What we start with is defining the opportunity. Once we've identified a company, the usual trip is to go through an NSERC Engage. UBC is of course very, very successful in Engage grants. So that's a first step, or the other type is the other first step, as I said before, is it's actually a demonstration, it's actually a living lab project first. And because of the living lab project, we bring the researchers in, and then we do the Engage. So a good example on the bioenergy plant, we have one Engage going with Nextera, and that was the first interaction between this researcher and Nextera. So after that, basically when you find out what the problem is or what the company needs, then there's lots of ways you can go. If the problem happens to be people-based, HQP-based, then we've got the MyTax route. That's phase one. What's the problem? And then the phase two is actually getting some stuff done. Go move through MyTax for people. If it's knowledge development, then it would be either an NSERC CRD or a strategic grant. Those two become available. What it really means is you now have an industrial partner that's fairly active, right? Either they can either be at a level where they're just involved bystanders, or they'll actually roll their sleeves up and start putting some money into the table. And then the next step after that, when there's a phase, the next phase is, again, if it's people, there's the postdoctoral fellowship, which is another thing that we use, that we could always move into a demonstration living lab. So we're working with James Olson right now, for example, to look at an opportunity that he's got that's being actually moving through this process, that he's actually come up with an idea that he would like to then roll out to a living lab type project. And if it's a facilities, then we're, if we need to look after that, it gives good foundation for a CFI grant. So there is opportunity to see how this goes through your process. So people that are currently involved, the people that I can immediately join the dots on right now, we have connections with BC Hydro and Fortis. In fact, UBC has an MOU with BC Hydro, so we have a very easy way to move in and out of that organization, although BC Hydro, I must admit, is not the easiest organization to work with. I don't know if anybody's had experience working with them, but they're interesting, and with the reorganization, they're even more interesting. Government, we have an MOU.
Are they interested in a security project? I mean, that's a serious question.
I'm sure they would be. We just have to.
Because that's what they're running into flack on right now, and they don't seem to have done their homework.
Well, the problem, Kelly, on that is, you do research on things you sell, not on things you buy. BC Hydro is buying those meters and buying that stuff. We need to go and talk to the people who are supplying the meters. Actually, Honeywell's involved with that, and so is Cisco. So no wonder they're having...
Oh, right, but if Hydro were part of the project and said, we will not buy replacements unless they...
Exactly. So that's part of the process. One of the problems, Kelly, on these things is sometimes the big companies don't even know the problems they've got. So that's a little bit of a problem. City of Vancouver, we're helping them through their process, and obviously more on just how do you implement sustainability within a municipality than kind of these real technical projects. But again, what it does is it gives us a point person to actually target, and then if there's a question that says, we'd like to be able to talk to yada yada somebody, then we can actually make that happen. Research councils, NRCFC, that's the Fuel Cell Institute, and NSERC we have connections with, obviously. Large enterprises right now, Honeywell, GE, and Cisco, but I'm saying we're going to add some more, hopefully with some of the German connections too. We're working with Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, AFCC here, this is mainly on the fuel cell stuff, and the Fraunhofer Institute, we're trying to get engaged with them in Germany. So that's a very aggressive thing we're working on right now. And then there are innovative startups, and we're realizing that seems to be the model for a lot of these big companies is, in fact, they're not doing a lot of R&D internally. They're watching the startups, and then they just buy them. That's how they're getting their new IP. They're just buying it. So we are continually working with the companies like Nextera, Pulse, and then this company called Coolidge, which I'll tell you a little bit about. And the idea is that we develop them to a certain point, and the big guys also look at them at the same time. And hopefully they help the small companies either by co-marketing, or co-branding, or even by purchasing. The long-term game plan, of course, is that these companies will get so involved with UBC that they will decide that this is where they need to put a product development center. And that's sort of my long-term goal that I'm hoping will happen. Move forward. So some of the examples we have, like SURS, most of you are familiar with it. There's been a lot said about SURS. It's a sustainable building. It was a CFI project. The building itself is the research project. As I said, it's got something like 1,200 sensors in it. It recycles heat. It actually takes heat from the US building that it exhausts. It sends it back through the SURS. We get heated up. And it gets heated up, and then we then also provide heat back to doing your map like this. That's a little better. Is that better? Yep. So the idea is that you've got this building, and it is. How many people have actually been in the SURS building? It's worth a walk down to it to take a look at it. It's pretty impressive, and if you want to have a look through it, let me know and we can set something up.
They actually got a cafeteria, unlike us.
Yes, they do, but the prices are outrageous. So, but it's sustainable. But it's sustainable. So the whole idea in that thing is it's an integrated. There's people from architecture, applied science, psychology. Everybody's in that group in that facility, and the idea is to try and use an integrated approach to move sustainability forward on campus and globally. Very interesting. John Robinson's the director of that. The other one, the one that I'm involved in, is the Bioenergy Research Center, the Research and Demonstration Project. It's a project that is a partnership with Nextera, which is a local biomass gasification company, and General Electric through their Jonbacher engine group in Austria. Now, some of you say, this isn't new, what's so, I mean, I can go up to UNBC, I can go to there's a plant out in New Westminster's got a Nextera project, and you can go to Dockside Green, Victoria. What is different about this project is it's going to be the first cogen plant. So what the deal is that not only is this plant going to produce thermal heat for the hot water, but it is also going to supply electricity. So we are actually going to be generating our own electricity on campus, and that adds some challenges. And the electricity is going to be generated by taking the syngas that's produced by the gasifier and then injecting that directly into the internal combustion engine. The unknown is whether you can actually run an internal combustion engine for a long time on a diet of biogas, the gas and syngas coming out. There is some conditioning that goes on, but we don't know if that's going to be good enough. We're pretty well assured, but certainly what we're doing is we're having the folks from the Clean Energy Research Center involved in working with them on that. So what's happened on that project, because it's kind of been the first example of how we've done this, is we now have established a research program committee, and that's chaired by Dave Wilkinson, and it has a representation from Nextera. We already have the rules of the road all figured out about the IP and everything else. It's all been settled out. And so what happens is this research program committee, this is an opportunity for Nextera to pitch problems and for researchers to pitch problems. And sometimes Nextera decides that they want to be involved just as innocent bystanders. They usually they will send a letter of support or something like that if they think that's interesting. So some of the work that Shahab is doing on fuel characterization, for example, it's not core to them as they think, and so they've just supported it with a letter of support. But there are other more key that gets right into the technology they're developing that John Grace is doing, and that's actually, I think, a funded research project. So there are all these various levels that you can get involved in. And we're doing exactly the same with the microgrid or the smart energy system grid that we're working on, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Kind of cool. It's been built over the last 14 months, I think. 14 months. We got a lot of flack from the Board of Governors that we actually moved this thing too quickly, which I was quite surprised that they believed that we were moving too fast. But I guess, as we said, we were moving at the speed of industry. It's 12 months, going to have 12 months of demonstration, so that's the first 12 months. Then it's going into a demonstration and operation phase, and in 2015 it then turns into just pure operations. But it is a research program. There is a limited amount of space in that facility to house some research activity. So obviously folks like the Clean Energy Research Center are very, very interested in it. My forestry background, of course, my interest was it's the first, CLT stands for cross-laminated timber. It was the first demonstration of cross-laminated, it is the first demonstration of cross-laminated timber in an industrial building in North America. It is also the first building that's built with Canadian wood in a Canadian plant of CLT. And it uses a tremendous amount of fiber, which is a good thing. It's a rather unique design. The architects have done a great design. You can see on the side of it, there's the panels that are sort of on, they're what I call gills, and they're going to be used just for sound attenuation. So it's a very good medium for doing that. So we're going to be doing some sound analysis and all those other good things and workplace environment type studies. Unfortunately, once it's all finished, that whole side is going to be clad with a combination of glass and galvanized panels, so you won't actually see that it's a wood building. So if you're interested in seeing a really cool wood building, do it now while it's still open, because over the next couple of weeks, it's actually going to be sheathed in with galvanized. Yes?
Yeah, on the previous slide, could you tell us what the difference is between the three phases, between, like, the difference, what does it mean to go from a practical standpoint, to go from demonstration to operation? What changes?
We figured that by the time it's after 3 years, it won't be new stuff anymore. And so most researchers won't be interested in it.
Okay, so the actual day-to-day operation isn't changing and the finances aren't changing.
No.
It's just that that's a realistic expectation.
The realistic expectation is that researchers won't want to, this will be just like a steam plant, right? And why would you want to go to the steam plant? Now, if there are research, there are still some research opportunities. If there are some, we'll just make that longer. In fact, NextEra has already identified that they'd like to do a project of looking if they can actually take the syngas and increase the hydrogen output, such that to a point where you could actually replace the Jan-Bacher with a fuel cell. So that's may actually lengthen.
So it isn't an issue of tax incentives or something like that?
You have to truck in fiber and so on to
We do. We do.
That's sort of a negative.
That is a negative. And the interesting thing is that I would say that 80% of this whole project has been about the social license to do this, rather than actually the technology. And this part of the trucking, that was a big discussion. We went through a whole bunch of interactions with public and all that talk about that. And I think one of the key things is that if we're going to get involved in these kind of projects, we're going to have to accept a lot more responsibility. People don't think at all about what's going on in Fort St. John and Fort St. James or whatever in the gas cleanup plants when they turn on their natural gas fireplaces down here. And yet when we use biomass, we're going to have the whole thing is right here. And that I think is one of the most exciting things about this whole project is it's what I call YIMBY, which is yes in my backyard. We're actually put the plant right there to actually prove that you could do this. And I think a lot of people would like to have hidden it down South Campus somewhere, but it's right up where people are going to see it. Again, I want to quickly cover this. The CLT from the side, it actually drove a whole new standard. So there is opportunities through these living lab type projects, as you can see, to have quite a very much large impact. And these things just happen because it's driven by the industry partner who wants to sell and market the product. Coolidge is a real small startup company in Vancouver. I think they're a spin-off, or actually a lot of them came from Lauren Whitehead's company that was then sold to Philips Lighting. These guys stayed in Vancouver and they've now created a company called Coolidge. Interesting thing about LED lights is everybody thinks they're very energy efficient, but they produce a heck of a lot of heat. And the secret thing that Coolidge has figured out is that they can do it without heat. That's where the cool comes from. So the interesting thing for these companies get lots of support. They got the STDC grants to do these industrial developments. And I was talking to the Coolidge guys at a meeting somewhere else, and I said, yeah, but do people actually like what you're going to make? And he said, we don't know. And that's not part of the STDC grant. So what we found out a lot of these green technologies is that the human factors testing, whether people actually like it or not, is just not looked at. And as you might well know, there are a couple very, very efficient and green buildings on campus that nobody likes working in. And that's how they're green, because nobody goes there. You know, maybe you should find out a little bit whether people actually like this stuff before you go and foist it upon the marketplace. And so what we've done is we've said, that's Alan Kingston in the psychology department, and the idea is saying, well, you know, is LED lighting really that as good as people say it is? Does it provide the comfort kind of lighting that people like? And does it in fact reduce the energy? And so what they did is they replaced some luminaires that they had, the usual fluorescent type things, with these LED panels. I tell you, when you walk into the lab, it's as if it's like uber bright in there. So actually the first thing they're going to do is turn them down, and then they're going to play with the colors. The beauty of the LED system is that it's extremely controllable. You can do a lot of things with the controls on dimming and coloring and all that kind of stuff. And here's where an interesting synergy comes, because Cisco, when we're dealing with them, bringing them into the mix, I'm not telling you any secrets. Oh, this is taped, isn't it? Cisco is very, very interested in looking at power over Ethernet. This is one of their areas that they think is very, very interesting. They've already, you already have 32 watts over Ethernet. That's why your phones, your Cisco phones work at your desk, I hope. They have announced that they've gone to 68 or 60, and they would like to move that even higher. So that starts bringing the possibility of actually powering one of these LED lights with an Ethernet, which gives you also controllability. So what is the impact of that whole thing? And that's kind of the interesting thing that I see happening with this living lab, is you're going to have players in the mix that then again connect the dots. And UBC is right in the middle working with the researchers. So this one's very, the key thing on this research agenda, what they're going to work on is, the first thing is, what is the evaluation methodology? Again, I said there's a lot of these solutions, they don't even bother evaluating. So one of the deliverables from Alan is a methodology for how do you go about testing these things. What's the testing protocol for these kinds of things, where you're actually impacting office environment? What's the user impact? Do they like it? And then obviously the economic impact. The big one also is the smart thermoelectric grid. We, as I said, we actually own our own grid on campus. We have a lot of copper wire, transformers, substations, all that kind of stuff. We don't really have a very good idea what's happening out there. So this is the whole idea of making it smart. And Jose and all have been working very hard at trying to model this and figure this out. And obviously there's a lot of interest in this. BC Hydro is very interested, but they obviously don't want to play with their grid. They would love to play with somebody else's grid. So we're going to see if we can do that here. We've already got various components. We've got the bioenergy plant coming on. So therefore, the first thing you've got to start realizing, now we've got choices. We've got choices to produce hot water. We've got choices to produce hot water and electricity. Okay, which one do we produce? We also have the opportunity to dim the lights. Maybe what would happen if we could dim all the lights on campus? What would happen if we could cut out every second street light? Is there an opportunity for us to manage our demand and supply differently, such that we meet our GHG targets or reduce the cost or whatever? What do we want to optimize? That's a great question. Nobody quite knows. What do we want to optimize to? And so that's where this whole area is being developed, and we're very excited because the components are coming together on this. The bioenergy plant, as I said, will be up and running in this quarter. I've just received a grant to actually put in about, I'm hoping, between 1.5 and 2 megawatts of battery storage on campus. How do you manage that? How do you control it? How do you dispense it? And to where do you direct that supply? We're also working with the development of looking at electric vehicles. How do you use that technology? Can you, for example, have a situation where you have a bunch of electric vehicles, can you give credit to the driver or the owner of that if UBC perhaps drains a little power out of the battery? Because we have these peaks during the day when everybody uses power, right? It would be nice to wipe that peak costs us money. If we could actually draw that or flatten that peak down, I was thinking that I think it would be a bit embarrassing though if the driver of his electric vehicle didn't make it home because UBC had helped themselves to it. There's another story about that too, is the idea of this power over Ethernet. Of course, we would just have to have Ethernet to each port on the spot on these, and students could actually charge their laptops as well as receive data at the same time through the Ethernet. What we wouldn't tell them is we could also draw the power out of there. So they'd go home every day and realize that, I wonder why my laptop is dead after every time I go to UBC. Anyway, so batteries, I mean, this gives us an opportunity to start looking about integration of renewables into our whole system. And this is a huge research opportunity. There is tons of data. There is data analytics. There's data security problems. There's data integrity problems. There's all sorts of opportunities in here. And I think that a lot of the companies, as Kelly has talked about, have completely underestimated the gotchas that are out there waiting for them to fall into. So there's some ideas there, but I'm sure that you folk will come up with much more interesting ones in the list there. But these are the ones we've started to think of. And these are the ones actually that are very interesting to people like BC Hydro from their technology group. This is the interest where Siemens comes in. It's the interest where Schneider Electric, all these people. And so we're building a case for why these groups should be involved with us. And again, it comes back to the point, where else in the world could you go which has a mixture of a city-sized operating grid that is open to looking at these kinds of problems? So if you take a look at the long-scale roadmap, we're going to go all the way from generation of power to storage, looking at emergency backup, but then let's overbuild the emergency backup to the point where we can actually use that as a contributor to the power. What about the opportunity for a completely DC building instead of having an AC? A lot of the material things we use right now are actually DC powered. I would think most of the technology in this room is actually DC that we've had to have to invert. Consumption, how do we control that? We've got a really interesting mix of buildings. We have residences, we have academic buildings, we have office space. We have just about every kind of building represented on campus that companies would like to figure out how they behave. Distribution, we have our own distribution network. Again, lots of different ways about moving energy around. What is the best currency, energy currency in the campus? Based on that, how do we move that currency from place to place? So, summary statement. So, if you take a look at the Living Lab initiative, it integrates the unique attributes of UBC and its partners to generate the solutions of the future. So that's the whole idea. We don't want the things that are available today. We've got these problems. How do we solve them? And how do we solve them with new ideas? And so we want to have this concept of continuous innovation happening within UBC Operations, which is a fundamental change that's happened over the last few years. And that the funding is there to actually do this. And working with Pierre, I work very closely with the finance department. Pierre is very open to the idea of saying, okay, we're going to spend over the next 3 years X millions of dollars on something. I'm willing to actually, if you can show me the case, which is both a research case and a business case, I will use that, I will aggregate that 5-year spend into one chunk. And usually that's enough to actually kickstart a fairly good project. So that's what we're doing in electric vehicles, that's what we're doing in this power grid thing, that's what we're doing with battery storage. So looking at, for the battery storage, how do you make a business case? You take a look around and find out where there's really sensitive research equipment that needs to be protected by batteries. That's a really good business case. Looking at individual feeders on campus that are becoming stressed because of the fact that the load is getting too heavy for them. Is there an opportunity to put a battery in there that can actually pick up the load during some of the times? And so the idea is that every project we do at UBC becomes smarter than the project we did before. So the idea, that's the only way we're going to be the leadership. If we just sit there and accept what people have done around the world, we're only going to be as good as. I don't think people want us to be as good as, they want us to be the best. So that's where we want to go. So that's kind of our vision statement. And then for researchers and students, the Living Lab adds this whole area of demonstration and evaluation to the process, because the commitment of the Living Lab is we're actually going to use the solution. Now, some people find that a little scary, but others are quite confident that this will work. And I think that it's a great vote of confidence by the senior executive that this will work, because they're actually investing in it. I mean, they're making a fairly large commitment, in fact, that the bioenergy plant will actually work, the smart grid system will actually work. There is, as many of you know, UBC is served by 2 major hydro lines that come into campus. There is a projection that those 2 lines will serve us till somewhere 2016 to 2020, somewhere in there. And there will be a need for a 3rd line. That 3rd line is going to be costing somewhere in the area of $50 million. It's a big chunk of money. So we can look at that and we can say, as people see that as a cost, I see that as an opportunity. Let's defer that capital cost and see if we can do something different. Because it's the same problem that's being faced all over the world. How do you make your system that you have now behave better? So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, so we can take questions.
Kelly, your hand was up
Kelly's
first.
had a question before.
Sorry?
This one here.
Oh, okay. You touched briefly or mentioned students. A lot of the projects that you described seem like they're very large, relatively speaking. Are there smaller scale things that undergraduate students could get involved with, and that sort of stuff? Or, for example, like, could they get access to the data from that building and do visualization projects with it? Or
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we are working with the teaching and learning folks. There are teaching and learning group within this whole sustainability thing, and that's how we make that connection. The things like the Masters in Clean Energy, that we get projects with them. There's this whole thing, the SEEDS initiative. I don't know if you know what that. The SEEDS initiative is where projects, very small projects, are actually pitched, and students can get involved. But yes, that's definitely something we want to do.
There is a 3D model campus, for example.
There is a 3D model of campus, and I would love to put some modeling of energy use and consumption and stuff like that on top of it. Yeah, Kelly.
Do you think there's an opportunity to engage some of this with the core operations of the university? So, for example, I think it was 5 years ago or so, there was this big push that included changing the start times of classes to spread out the morning peak. It's not clear what effect that had, because most students try to avoid the morning peak anyway. But if the academic scheduling process, which is just computation and therefore relatively cheap and fairly green, took into account students' commuting schedules when it scheduled things, if you could imagine a schedule where every student who commutes to campus, he doesn't walk, only came here 1 day less per week because of the way the schedules were set up, that would have tremendous.
Right. Yeah. Transportation is one of our largest footprints.
And another one is, it seems that the bookstore is mostly in the business of making money. And the used book markups are such that it's not a tremendously good deal. The university could take a very different attitude about that, including attitudes that there are policies, for example, that if a book is approved as a textbook, it will be used for a minimum of 2 years. And those things kind of impact Senate, et cetera, but they actually are our core business.
Yep.
And I guess the issue with me is, most of these things seem to be peripheral to our core business. I mean, yeah, we need heat to run, but our core business is not heating buildings.
No, our core business
It's heating brains.
Our core business, as far as I see, our core products are knowledge.
Yeah.
And
So the delivery of that
education.
knowledge and the way knowledge gets encapsulated, this comes back to textbooks, et cetera, or whether we might go to a textbookless campus because the university will license things in a different way.
You've got to talk to John Robinson about that. That's a good.
Well,
But I think
John probably has-
I think the problem, the interesting one about the scheduling, because we were talking about that ahead of time, it would be interesting for people who are interested. This is a great student thing to take a look at scheduling. What impact, given those goals, the greenhouse gas goals, what could the changes in scheduling do? What impact? I mean, some of the stuff, the early work that was done on the smart grid was just a model that was saying, this is a serious thing. There's actually a lot. You can actually do a lot with what we've got here if you manage it correctly. Nobody knew that there's opportunity existed until that model existed. So the idea of actually running it as an example is a key thing, right? So I guess one of the other problems, Kelly, on that is I think the commute time is outside of our scope, GHGs, but still. I
Well,
mean, it's-
but my guess is faculty can produce a lot more because more of us drive. And if every faculty member's schedule were set in such a way that they were strongly encouraged to not come to campus one day a week, that would also have and that's a more tractable problem.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
You can save a lot of money if you just pay me not to come to you.
Yeah, well, we just make you a sustainable building and then you will come. Well, actually, the whole idea about telecommuting and all this kind of stuff, I mean, it's something the universities have not embraced an awful lot. I mean, that's, for those of you that were around when the Tech campus, Tech BC campus, I mean, that was the whole idea about that. They made one small mistake, is that they took the idea of a non-commuting campus and they applied it to students who actually do like to get together. Because at that age they do want to get together and meet, not being on the end of a television screen. Anyway, so what are the human factors things they missed there?
The earlier slides you showed that 100% reduction. Is that a real possibility, really 100% reduction?
I won't be here.
You won't be here, but
I won't be here.
for those who will be here.
I'll leave it to those people to say.
So is that in the isolation of the entire rest of the world?
Yeah,
You can't get something for free.
I know. I mean, we've jokingly talked about a small nuclear plant somewhere on campus, but
Yeah, but also, for example, the grid that you showed,
yeah.
the equipment thing.
I think you could treat I mean, this is Brent Sauder speaking. I think you can take the first two goals as something we really want to, the other one is a stretch goal, whether we achieve it or not, but we're going to try. I mean, it's more aggressive than any other jurisdiction is trying, so. Yes. Yeah.
Another community on campus that is our residents, right? They're neither students nor researchers. How do they factor into all this?
Yes, so they actually, the residents, you mean the student residences or the adult the market housing?
Market housing.
Okay, market housing, yeah, we have a very good connection with the UNA, and that was started through our discussions we had with the Bioenergy plan, as you would expect. They were very interested. But there is with Ralph Wells, we work with them on defining research problems, because a lot of these companies that we talk with also would like to include a research component that has the residences involved. So for example, one company called Coronex, who wants to work with us they do data over power lines. Most of you, I think, you would have known about them. If not, they're also very interested in security and all these other good things. And they want to do a residence one, so we would be working with them. Again, this is another value of working with UBC. They don't have to run around and get a group of residents who want to do this. It's part of us. We would already find that for them. So there are a group of very motivated residents that want to use their stratas as test beds and things like that. So yeah, we include them in our sandbox. There's an example. They're talking. Even UNA right now is talking about using a fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell bus to commute to South Campus to replace the diesel one that they have. Whether they're going to be able to afford that, who knows? But they're certainly talking to that, and because of the expertise on campus about hydrogen. So.
But there's some serious sustainability issues that have been overlooked in planning the South Campus. A lot of people there are commuting downtown by car. For example, it hasn't been designed for you to live and work nearby.
There are some definite gaps.
UBC faculty haven't been given a major opportunity to buy there, which would mean there's much less commuting going on. So there's some high-level policy decisions by the university.
That's exactly right, and that's why when we say that when you talk about living lab, people immediately think that we're only talking to the engineers and the applied computer science people. There's a lot of human factor stuff that has to go on, and policy stuff. I think it would be great. I mean, as UBC moves forward with this policy school, I forget what the name. We just announced a new name for it the other day. The person who lost. But I'm sure that's going to be one of the areas that we're looking at, is that whole policy. There's a group within the SIRS group that actually is looking at the design of communities and things like that. I know that's a big issue with this new shopping center in Delta. I mean, you're going to have a huge spot that's it's just basically cars. It's got to be cars. It's the only way they're going to get the visit rate high enough.
Any other questions?
Just asking a question about how you know, how to encourage people to take the real costs into account of everything that we do. And of course, one of the best ways of doing that is to make the real costs transparent. And so when I spent a year-round sabbatical in France, you don't do your laundry in the middle of the day because you know you're going to get you're basically billed by wind, time-based energy usage, etc. And so so that always seems to be one of the issues in many sustainability initiatives.
I agree, and if you see, like, for example, specifically on that time of use type thing, I mean, BC Hydro you don't even mention that with BC Hydro. I mean, that's just not in their vocabulary, right? They don't want to talk about that. But that's where the value has been shown in most of these, like in Italy and other places where they've actually put it in. But, and it raises a whole bunch of opportunities for technology. So again, there would be an opportunity for UBC to put a time of day thing on. We're our own thing. You know, it's interesting that we don't send bills to individual departments for their heating, for example. We don't charge. I mean, the university absorbs all the cost for the lighting, for example. Great example I found out the other day before Christmas, for example, IT. So the IT department. There is this product called EnergyWise, and it's a component of all the Cisco gear. And it sits in the little corner of the Cisco gear, and it will manage your energy use on the Cisco network. And it will turn on and off anything that's connected on the network. It will throttle down. It'll do anything you command it to do. We have never turned that ability to do that on at UBC. And the great reason is IT does not pay for their power at UBC. We don't meter. It's like streetlights. I mean, it is fascinating. You find out all these little stories. Streetlights. I always wondered how the city of Vancouver paid for their streetlights. Right? The way you pay for streetlights, because nobody has individual meters on streetlights, is they say, how many streetlights do you have of what kind? We know that they draw X amount of power. That's the rate we charge you. Now, if you've driven around Vancouver, you realize that there's quite a few streetlights are off or out. They still get paid. Hydro still gets paid. And so the idea of, and this is where we're talking to Cornex about, is the idea of being able to actually monitor those things through the power line and get that data. What do you do with it? Then it's a huge opportunity. Kelly, last question.
Two comments. One is the rental residents for faculty and staff on Thunderbird have a policy, no laundry after 10 p.m.
No which?
No laundry. The second is when I was in high school, the girl I had a crush on, her summer job after we graduated was working for Southern California Edison, manning the phone because people called in and said what lights were turned off, and they got a rebate. The cities did.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we'd like to do, perhaps try with things like Cisco, and that is if we put IP internet control, there's things called IP ballasts. So theoretically, each one of the ballasts in this room would have an IP license, IP address. You could actually go and have a little app on your iPhone that would turn all the lights on. You know, very cool type things. The idea of being able to have an app that allows you to turn on, or like for example, they're designing the ceremonies route for the UBC to have a very, very bright lighting system in it, which they're only going to use it on certain occasions. Most of the time it's not going to be at that uber bright level. But boy, wouldn't it be neat to be in security to actually have the ability to turn on a section of that light if something is not going the way it should be going. I mean, it's kind of interesting to be able to have that flexibility. So controllability is a big thing, which is all about data. Okay?
Well, thanks, Brent, again, but I just want to say we taped the talk, and we'll be putting it online. I'll let you know where it is. If you want to see it again, or you want to tell people about it. And I guess people could just get in touch with you directly if they want to talk about any
Brent.Sauder@ubc.ca,
projects.
822-498. You can call. Not for the next 2 weeks. But please tell your colleagues. Tell your colleagues, and happy to talk with them. And also, thanks, and for inviting me. It's great. It's going to be good because he's going to do it. I enjoyed it. Good question.
There's associated with research and faculty.
Oh, okay.
This is his fault.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I've already had so many tables.
Yeah, I always had a problem. I gotta get working on it.
Autodesk, I know they're really large, and R&D group, have kind of a small R&D group in Toronto, and so one of the things they do is they're interested in building, and we couldn't get money, in doing we get heavily into buildings
There's a lot of
yeah. It is a big space.
It is a big space, but what we do is, it's interesting, we put up new reviews, other new RFIs, professor.
Okay, there was a back and forth
How are you? Nice to see you.
I mean, I've given, I think, 4 presentations to Cisco. The trip to Cisco is actually insane.
Oh, it's not going to show, but it is going to.
The Canadian ones, not the problem with the Canadian one was the fact that they wanted to do the same. Oh, well, we're going to be giving chairs out to cross Canada, so we'll do one here. Oh, UBC's had its share and all this kind of. We're saying, we're not talking about this. That's the old way of doing business. What do you want to create? And so when this power over Ethernet came up, I stopped and said, how much are you going to spend? Spend $10 million at UBC. We'll give you, and you'll have a demonstration site. Where's to do that? Just think what you could do if you could get 120 watts over What does that
Well, in fact, you're either going to get it over Ethernet or you're going to get your Ethernet over power. You're not
Exactly.
So they've got
That's
a
right.
choice.
And what happened was the reason that, and now this is where, when you were talking about why did we get their attention, their goal, the single driver in Cisco is to increase the number of ports. Because the more ports there are out there, the more things services Cisco is.
That's true.
So it's a very simple model. So, gee, we fill everybody's got the telephones plugged up to Cisco. What else can we sell? Right? So,
I would
Take this one, I like these ones.
well, this is the problem. You see, this is the problem. They're fighting with that.
I know, but this is a good example here. These are the clickers.
Yeah.
They all have batteries. This classroom has got power.
Well, go and look at the Sears building. It's a really neat thing. I can take a picture of it. I should show you. There's the wireless antenna thing that IT services put in. It sits there. There's a 110 volt plug right beside it, 6 feet up the wall. And when they built that thing, it paid $200, $300 to get that plug in there. By the time they pulled the wire and the electrician and everything, never be used.
Well, we put Ethernet ports in every single desk here.
Yeah.
We've never used them.
Yeah.
They just use ours.
What happens if they were there to also to see the ones that
There's power.
There's power too, separately from people.
Yeah.
They use the-
Yeah, so this would be, you just have one thing, you wouldn't have the power anymore. And then you don't have to have, the other nice thing is with Ethernet is you don't have to have a certified electrician.
Well, that's the other thing, is for laptops, as long as you get enough power for what you're consuming in class, you don't have to charge your laptop, you just need to keep it from running.
In fact, that's all you would give them. You would-
Yeah, so you give them a low amount of DC.
You would just keep, you do a little deal. I mean, here's the great thing, you would sense how much power was in the battery before the lecture, and you'd make sure that at the end it would be the same. Or a little bit less if you wanted.
By extending the lecture longer. Ann and I wanted to chat with you about Microsoft, so
Yeah.
Katrina said,
Okay, so I talked to Ann and I said that, guys, you guys are the lead on this. It's like a feeding frenzy. Everybody, they saw that word and went, oh my God, this is fantastic. I want to be on this. That's not going to happen.
okay, so are you one of the people who's working with the president on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to be Katrina, myself, and Angus. Okay, that's it.
Sounds like a good team.
And if it's smaller, I mean, by the time you get, you must have seen the emails. I mean, it was just
So can you tell us
all of it.
what currently the president's office, are they looking for a way to help whoever it is who's going to come up with something to do with Microsoft? Or are they looking for those people to help because the president has an agenda?
No, the president is basically going to say, this is a cool thing to do. Let's, Patrick, everybody, we're excited about this. Now, get everybody excited, now go and do something.
And
So
does
then us
does
soldiers
anybody
will have to
know
figure it.
where Don sits on, is this something, Don wants to do something?
We think so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because I can't imagine they've got space in the village that they can't dump. I mean, Microsoft doesn't have to pay rent if they don't want to, they can just let it go. So it must be Don holding on to it.
Yeah, I think this is something he wants to do.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a great example of what I want to do about this, having a development center right close to me. It's
Yep.
great, which is the idea. But I just wanted to make sure, I mean, as much as I will try.
So who owns the stuff over there?
Where, down there?
Yeah.
It'll be whoever the developer is. The way UBC is developing and this is the sad part of the South Campus, UBC basically develops the land and then they auction the land. And a developer says, well, I can pay X numbers of dollars for the land. And I think I can rent the space and do this and do that, and I can make those.
So we think Microsoft will eventually be going into a new facility, not existing space. Is that the idea? Or we don't know?
Yes. Well, I mean, the way I saw it is that I think that they're just, we were, I'll have to read my emails, but I think is that they would keep that space that they're talking about now, and then we would develop a research program and all that other good stuff, and then they would finally gravitate to something bigger. But I think the big thing that Tube has to say is that this is something that we are interested in, that the university is interested in.
So the big thing to tie this in with, it seems, is the whole initiative related to the digital economy, and I hear that there's, the number I heard was 30 million coming from someplace. It's going to be related to something related to digital economy.
Right.
And then there's the whole CERT applications.
Yes.
And it's clear that Microsoft in computer science, computer engineering, and CERT make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, well, and Berdina, there's an email that from Bertina saying,
Yeah.
Berdina was the person to talk to about.
Because, I mean, if they're actually putting, over a 7-year period, some small portion of their operational costs in an R&D center could be expensed against, its contributions.
That's exactly right, yeah.
So that's almost a no-brainer.
But the question of then, the secret to all these things is to find out what the motivation is.
Yeah.
And what's the expectation. So my recommendation is be the next step after Tube gets them all excited and tells them. I mean, he's going to say UBC wants this.
So he's going to meet with Don
Yeah.
sooner rather than
Yeah,
later.
he's going to say, this is something we really want to do. And Don's going to say, oh, this is, hopefully he'll say, this is something we want to do. So the next step is to have, what I recommend is Angus would take the lead on developing an umbrella relationship that says, these are the rules of the road, just so there's no surprises. And then you guys would be free then to develop specific research project under that umbrella. So it'll all deal with how does the IP get treated, how does this stuff get, all that kind of stuff. And then you're free to go. And then hopefully you can develop a whole big program underneath that. And I'd like to see what opportunity we can give, because the way I read it, it's very much on the Microsoft game side. But I'd like to
Well,
use
that's
that.
certainly where Don is.
Yeah, I would certainly like to use that as entree to say, let's do other things. Now, the only reason why Oliver is involved is he buys a lot of stuff from Microsoft. So if we can use Oliver to do to show that we're spending this kind of money, and that's what we do, right? We take this money and we say, look, we're spending this money anyway with Microsoft. Yes, we do.
There's another player in this at Microsoft, which is Bill Buxton, who we know very well.
Yes, Bill.
Yeah, and thanks, I had 2 already.
He's always been with Microsoft.
No, but he's currently with Microsoft. He's talked for quite some time about trying to get something in Vancouver. At one point, he wanted to have a house in Southlands. I think that's no longer on the list. Last May, he was here for the CHI conference when he was in town, and what he said was his wife was over on the island looking at property.
Wasn't he in the SI fellow?
No, he was in Toronto, but he's been Xerox Park, Apple, Xerox England. He's visited, but he's never had any sort of an appointment here. So, but
Maybe I met him when I was with Canary. Doing Canary.
that's quite possible, yeah. So,
No, we should.
it's a question of when we would sort of activate that connection.
Is there a connection with Microsoft?
And this is the opportunity to see how
He's with Microsoft
very
Research.
Bobby did that stuff on.
And there's other connections
For
too.
education.
Yeah.
But is there a link to actually, this goes back here, is there a link to take this Microsoft, the stuff you're doing, we're going to do with these people, to actually embed it into an operations at UBC? Can we use this stuff to actually teach, to do some of our core stuff? I don't know. I mean, as we said, Maria used to do that.
Well, that was with eGEMS, that was much more embedded in a research project that was out, because that was K through 6.
Yeah.
That was 5 through 6, but. The issue there is that Microsoft already does this in spades, especially in the States, a lot. And if you look at, especially in the teaching level, it's much more with the second and third tier universities, because the faculty there don't have big research grants. They want money, and so they'll do things that people, research-intensive universities typically don't want to do.
Right, so what's the opportunity, what could they develop that would actually work in a top tier university, right? Like, one of the things that.
Well, what works is to have an R&D center where they've got access to top grad students, which is quite a different
So
model.
an example is, one of the Honeywell offerings is this open source system called Tritium. What Tritium does, it's about the same size as a flash drive, and it basically plugs into any machine that has an RS-232 port. And whatever data or controllability is present on that RS-232 port becomes internet accessible. And so just think about these, you have these Tritium, and they're about a couple bucks each, which makes them real cheap, you can just hand them out. Just think about putting them in all sorts of things, and then you have a master controller somewhere that takes all the data. Well, as part of the project we're going to do is we're going to hopefully embed Tritium Niagara. Niagara is the receiving end. Niagara receives all the signals and makes sense of it, but make that university-wide. So think of it, if you want to do a research project that requires you to collect data on something that's moving or something that's remote, something that you're not quite sure where it is on campus, it's already, the infrastructure is already in place to do that.
There's also a lot of privacy issues that
There are a lot of privacy
people
issues.
should worry about, and that was my comment.
But they did this in one of the universities. I was laughing when you were talking about this one, about the projectors. They actually used that in the States as a student project. And what they've done is they've put these little tritium chips in all their overhead projectors, and they actually have it come back about how many hours everyone has been on. It's now time to change the light bulb, so that it doesn't die profs
Well, ours die because they're programmed to die every 2 hours. And nobody uses that who's not on the network, either wired or wireless. So there could be a little app that everybody gets for free who's a faculty member, and it says, I'm using the projector in this room. Don't turn the goddamn thing off.
Microsoft Research is doing a lot on sustainability and assistive technology and so on in the environment.
Yeah, well,
At
that's.
the University of Washington, they're very close.
Oliver here is spending lots of money, and the interesting thing about IT on campus is they seem to have a refresh budget and all this other kinds of stuff, so they're spending money all the time. And so what we want to do is get access to that. So on the data centers, some of the work like we were talking about.
So the comment I made about other universities, we might seriously think about what does UBC want to do with a partnership with the University of Washington?
Yeah.
Because that's the closest top-tier university to us. It's in our time zone. It's an easy commute when you need to.
It's the biggest public R&D
And
operation in the U.S.
they have a
You
lot of
mean
Microsoft.
on the sustainability side or with Microsoft?
Both. Computer science at UW is far ahead of us in terms of what they're doing in sustainability. Partly because they have an high school and we still don't. Because they're
Well,
partly.
we should talk about this. I'd like to know what they're doing if you've got
There's a
something
guy
that says.
called Shveti Patel, I'll send you a link to his work.
Yeah, what are they actually doing?
There's actually a number
I mean,
of
are
them.
they how?
He's doing the smart grid analysis
And
stuff.
sensory, he just got one of the MacArthur Genius Awards.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, here would be an opportunity for him to play on a much bigger grid than he'd ever get in the States.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the same thing when you talk to the guys at BCIT. They are doing very interesting stuff on smart grid, but it's very limited. I mean, when we talk about the ability here to have 2 power stations and a 2 megawatt cogen plant, this just drives me. I was talking to the guys at Fraunhofer and I was telling them we were bringing a 2 megawatt cogen biomass project on